If you've ever experienced anything strange or bizarre like these stories, or if you have another scary story you'd like to share, go to astheravendreams.com and click the button to send it my way. And of course, thank you. I'm going to try to make this as fast and coherent as possible. First, I just want to state that although I have a high interest in the UFO and alien topic, I am not in the business of making things up. I'm simply writing this because I want to know if someone else has had this same experience. I've researched intensively online, and although I've read similar things to my experience, nothing has truly brought validity to mine in the level of detail that would satisfy me. Hopefully this gets around to someone who also has had this experience. I'm a musician. I make music for hobby and profit. I work as a contractor for the Navy 6 days a week. Very busy, and I don't have much time to be BSing around. By the way, this is not a whistleblower story. Me being a contractor for the Navy has nothing to do with this story, just stating my 9 to 5 for relatability, I guess. I was born in '89. I grew up in Long Island, New York, and that is where this encounter took place. My neighborhood is not the best, and not the worst. There was definitely an element of gangs, drug dealing, and ignorance integrated into society. Even though I blindly participated in these shenanigans, I was always naturally a peaceful brother. Eventually, I would dedicate a lot of my time researching spirituality, UFOs, and any other topics that brought us all to this subreddit. I attended a school called International Academy of Consciousness, and soon after, it would become my self-appointed duty to tell everyone in my hood about all these wonderful things, like sleep paralysis, out-of-body experiences, quantum physics, and how it can be used to explain spiritual experiences. In my eyes, spirituality is just a science we can yet measure. By the way, my encounter with these beings was not a sleep paralysis encounter. It was a fully awake and conscious physical encounter. Please bear with me, I'm not trying to be suspenseful, but I have to tell the events that led up to my encounter because I believe it is why they showed themselves to me. There was a certain feeling I would get when talking to someone from my neighborhood about these things that were rarely ever talked about. I would see the amazement in their eyes, finding out that they could also relate, but never really felt comfortable talking about it because of society. This was a feeling that I would chase. I started seeing orange orbs in the sky, falling, hovering, moving awkwardly, disappearing, reappearing. This really put me over the edge. I couldn't stop looking up at night. I noticed that they always appeared whenever I would be having these conversations with people, and I would get that feeling. They were not shy either. Everyone would see them and be amazed. We all recorded them on our phones. I still have the recordings. This was around 2013. You can Google orange orbs on YouTube and there are hundreds of videos of exactly what I saw. I would bring this topic up to people who are least likely to believe me, and sure enough, orange orbs would appear to prove my point. And this made their presence feel very personal to me. I would speculate that they liked the fact that I was preaching peace concepts to people who didn't think they could relate. One night, it was really getting to me that this had become a reality. I wanted to see if they would appear if I was by myself. This is hard to do in New York, considering how condensed it is. I took a walk to the nearest school. The field was dark, no lights. My plan was basically to seclude myself and ask them to show themselves. Once I got there, I started to scare myself with the thought of them actually appearing. They did not show themselves, and I didn't really stick around to find out. 2 days later is when it happened. My girlfriend at the time pulled up to my house and called me to come outside. I got in the passenger side of the car. She was upset and crying about job-related issues. We were also going through a breakup. Before she got there, I was in a relatively good mood. I was trying to be supportive as possible, but I also didn't want this affecting me. There was a long, silent pause. She had her head in the steering wheel, and during this moment of silence, I was just trying to protect my energy, putting myself in an imaginary bubble. This is when it happened. I had my head down in the car. I looked up, and on top of my neighbor's house were 3 very tall beings. They looked like humans. Very tall, 8 to 9 foot tall Caucasian humans. They had blue hooded robes. Their heads were literally glowing yellowish in color, just like how saints and enlightened beings were depicted in historical art. They blended in with the trees behind them in the most unexplainable way. I'll have a picture attached that I drew the very next day. Keep in mind, this somehow had no effect on the clarity in which I saw them. It was almost as if they were being cautious of who can see them and who couldn't. There was an older being in the center. His age resembled a 50-year-old human, full head of white hair and connecting beard. He was smiling at me. I was in complete shock. I've never really been in shock like that. The size of them was overwhelming, and then they had the nerve to be standing on the roof. Imagine someone taller than Shaq standing on a roof. They could have pulled themselves on the roof from the ground effortlessly. And this was a 1-story house, by the way. And if for some reason you're thinking this could have just been some people on the roof at night, no. There aren't many white people in the neighborhood. My neighbors were black, and they're not the type of people you could just play around on their roof at night, if you get me. Let alone the size, the blue robes, and the glowing heads. Anyway, I'm staring at the older guy in his face in amazement, but I'm also very scared. Like, in shock kind of scared. He's smiling. He was sending me all this good energy, but I'm so scared that I couldn't help but think of how that was kind of creepy. I quickly put my head down. I didn't know if I wanted to continue with what was going on anymore. Here's where it gets even more interesting. He talked to me telepathically. When I put my head down, he told me, "Don't be afraid. It would be creepy if it was just me up here, but I'm with my family. We have families just like you do." I've never heard a voice that was not mine in my head before. This was completely different from a thought. Not only could I hear his voice, but I could hear the direction it was coming from, as if it was spoken with sound. I lifted my head to look at them again, and now there were at least 7 of them. It was like he was introducing his family. This absolutely scared me just because of the overwhelming size difference. When I think about it, I get so angry at how scared I was, because they were doing everything they could to comfort me, but it just wasn't working. They all had pleasant looks on their faces, and they seemed so happy to see me. I remember getting a moment to gather myself a little bit. I put my head back down and I said to them in my head, "I know I asked for this, but I don't think I'm ready." That would be one of my biggest regrets in life ever. When I looked back up, they were gone. And the orange orbs never showed up in that fashion again. I have seen the orbs years later, but never so boldly. Never in a way that was as personal as the times before my encounter. I remember just staring in shock for a while after they were gone. My girlfriend still had her head on the steering wheel. I didn't make a sound this entire time. I started running through what just happened in my head, every detail. The encounter was relatively short, but I remember wondering how much time went by because my girlfriend didn't budge. I couldn't stop thinking about hearing his voice in my head. I heard it clear as day, yet I was speculating if he said it in English, my only known language. It almost seemed like I would have understood him no matter what language I spoke, yet at the same time I heard his voice and the direction it came from. It's very hard to explain. We went inside after a while and went to sleep. I didn't mention it to her. I only told my brother the next day. It was on my mind all night, and I was regretting telling them that I wasn't ready. The next day I ran outside soon as I woke up. To my surprise, there were no trees behind the house where they were standing, just clear sky. This was confusing because they were blending in with the trees when I first saw them. I just sat in the grass staring at the house for a while in awe. If anyone has had this experience, please let me know. I've heard of Nordic aliens before, but none with glowing heads. I need to know. This is my first time sharing any experience online that happened to myself or anyone else. So I'm sorry if I drag in places or if the formatting is bad. I will change names of people involved, but the places and road names will be factual. I've never shared this other than with her until now, because although I have belief in paranormal events to a certain extent, aliens, ghosts, certain legendary creatures, I'm not the type that just believes every story to be true, or want people to think I've lost my mind. It was early summer 2010. I only remember because my 21st birthday had just passed, and I was finally legal to hit the bars. It was a Friday night, and I was up having a drink at a bar that my cousin David was the bartender at. It was a small town bar that, outside of an event like a band or other entertainment was there, it usually stayed pretty quiet. It was very early in the evening, and I had just gotten out of work for the night, working at a McDonald's in another small town, less than 10 miles from the small town I lived in. I was only on my second drink of the evening when my phone rang. On the other line was a friend of mine from childhood, James. He was calling, asking if I wanted to come over to his brother's house and join them for a night of poker, beer, and weed. It sounded like a good time in my book, and since it was literally only one sip into my second gin and tonic, I agreed to make the drive into Toledo. Most people know where Toledo is, but for those who don't, it's a city in the northwest region of Ohio, about an hour or so south of Detroit. It was about a 20-minute drive from my small town, and I figured it would be a good time. I stopped at home to grab some cash. I only ever took 10 to 20 bucks with me to the bar to make sure if I ever got caught up having a good time drinking, I didn't screw up and have too good of a time, and end up closing down the bar that evening. I left my house at 11:05 p.m. I remember this distinctly because I had called James to tell him I was on my way, as they were going to wait for me and start the poker game at 11:30. We always played a tournament style of poker game, where we all put our money in at once, got equal amount of chips, and played until there was only one person left with any chips, who then got to keep all the money. I took my usual route over to his brother Eddie's house, as I have done so many times before. We had all gotten together for a group of anywhere from 4 to 6 of us, and would play poker in Eddie's basement at least twice a month, usually more. I had just gotten to the corner of Oakdale Street and East Broadway. I was sitting at a red light in an area that's nothing but residential housing outside of the elementary school that sat at that exact corner. I'm sitting up, looking at the red light, waiting for it to change, which always seemed to take absolutely forever coming from this direction, when I noticed something in the sky that, from my vantage point, was partially hidden directly behind the red light. It was a very bright light that seemed to be pointing straight down, almost like it was a helicopter using a spotlight to identify something, but much, much brighter at the point of origin. I heard absolutely nothing after rolling my windows down, and knew this could not possibly be a helicopter, or I would absolutely be able to hear it. Wanting a better view, I pulled into the parking lot of an ice cream shop that sat directly across the road from the school I was nearby, and got out of my car to try to figure out what this thing was. When I got out of the car, I stared up into the sky and immediately found it again. It couldn't have been a plane because it didn't have the right shape. It was more oval than anything. Most stories you hear like this say that it's circular, but it was definitely an oval shape. I almost thought perhaps it was a blimp given the shape, but it seemed far too long to be a blimp, even by the measurements of some everyone knows about, like the Goodyear blimp. Plus, it had no decals or identifying marks. It was either silver or grayish. After what felt to me about 30 seconds or so of looking at this thing, my eyes started to burn. Not burn in a sense of like extreme burning or anything like that, but almost like that feeling of when a bug flies into your eyes and causes them to water up. I closed my eyes and began to rub them. My eyes were closed at this point, so obviously all I could see is black. After finally getting my eyes to stop bothering me, I try to look up again and find it, only for it to be gone. I looked all around, but I could not see it anymore. This is a very densely populated neighborhood with trees, houses, etc., able to obscure any view of things that you'd look up in the sky to see. After a little less than a minute, I decided, oh well, time to go play poker. I get over to Eddie's house, which is about 4 blocks from where this had taken place, and I knock on the basement door. A few moments go by, and no one answers. I decide to go to the front door and knock. Figured maybe since I'm probably 5 or 10 minutes early, maybe they were upstairs playing on the PS3. I knock on the door, but still no answer. I finally start knocking very loudly on the door, almost pounding. Eddie finally answers the door and says, "Man, why the hell are you knocking on my door this late?" I look at him honestly confused and said, "Your brother said to come over and play some cards with you guys." He stares at me for what felt like an eternity, and finally responds, "Yeah, man, I know he did. He called you 5 or 6 hours ago. It's 4:30 in the morning. How late did you think we would be playing?" This scared me quite a bit, as from what I had remembered, at this moment, it could not possibly be any later than 11:25 to 11:30 at most. I attempted to play it off and say, "Damn, man, I must have lost track of time. Can I use your bathroom before I head back home?" He agrees and tells me that I should splash some water on my face, as I look like I'm either drunk or haven't slept in a week. I walk into his bathroom, and my eyes are absolutely bloodshot, and it almost looks like I have 2 black eyes. To this day, I have absolutely no idea what happened to me that night. I have no explanation for the lost hours worth of time. How I could have not possibly noticed that much time being passed, or how on earth something that felt like my eyes being irritated by a mosquito or something similar flying into my eyes. I don't want to pretend to know what it was and try to explain it, or even assume that whatever it was that I saw that evening had anything to do with it, but it has creeped me out ever since. Hi friends, first time caller. Background for me. I'm a 29-year-old American man who grew up in a conservative Christian environment. In the last decade, I've identified as a progression Christian, with what I think is a more inclusive view of the world. I've admired the mystics of church history, but I never really had any experiences that I would describe as spiritual. Until this year. Three key shifts in my worldview have been occurring this year. First, I've started meditating, with mentorships from Christians and Buddhists, and have found it helpful. Second, I developed a joy at seeing the stars at night, and started devouring information about planets. The vastness of space and its endless possibilities are so cool to me. Third, I've been reading about non-human intelligence. I had been mildly interested in the UFO phenomenon since childhood, and always felt that there was some possibility of their reality. But the interest had lain dormant until the congressional hearings. I thought the testimonies were super cool, and I felt fairly convinced that non-human intelligence had visited and existed on the Earth. In the fall, I began poring over the CIA FOIA stuff and watching all the documentaries, and I was fascinated. But there was never any personal connection I felt to the trend, until I started reading John Mack's book on abduction and found myself spooked. I tried to picture what it would be like to stare into the deep black eyes of a gray, and thought that it would be a frightening experience. Then, I saw someone with black eyes. I was sitting in a coffee shop, working. Two people, a tall man and a woman about a foot shorter, walked in and made an order. I could see tattoos peeking out of the man's shirt on his neck. Both people were wearing loose-fitting black jackets. I passed by the man on the way to the trash can and noticed his eyes. It seemed that the black outlined the edge of his iris. I thought that he must be wearing some interesting contact lenses. I returned to my spot and ventured a glance at the silver-haired woman. She locked eye contact with me with piercing eyes. At first, I noticed a milky white haze, and I wondered if she was blind. But then the blackness in her eyes became clear to me. I found it terrifying. My heart raced and I quickly broke eye contact. I stared at the wall, refusing to engage my peripheral vision. Feeling frozen or like a rat caught in a trap, all my sense of agency disappeared. I felt so outclassed, and I knew in my heart that I didn't know what I was getting myself into with my UFO fascination. No one else in the room was reacting to them. I wondered if they had arrived just to take me. I felt intensely alone for 2 to 3 minutes. Well, they left. I asked a man next to me if he had noticed anything about their eyes. He said that he hadn't been looking. He reassured me that I may have observed colored contact lenses or dilated pupils from drug use. Later, a family member suggested that I had seen a sclera tattoo, and when I googled the image, I did find that sight terrifying. Those explanations were comforting to me in the moment, but hours later I felt still quite spooked. I felt worried that I would run into the couple again. I didn't sleep well for the next week, sensing every creaking sound in my apartment. I stopped reading Mac's book at night. Had it been coloring my imagination? Despite what seemed like a negative experience, I felt the event had shown me my fear. This was a primal terror I had never felt before. Animalistic, you know? Like a squirrel or a cockroach scattering away from a human. I was very frightened of going through doors. I recalled what the Greys in Mac's book had said about fear, that it stood in the way of connected consciousness, that it held us back from understanding. My Christian mind naturally went to the appearance of Gabriel to Mary and his insistence that she need not be afraid, and many other biblical stories where the human's first reaction to God or an angel was fear. I felt that I finally understood the cosmic terror someone would feel in the presence of a higher intelligence. And, of course, part of me felt that I needed to frame my experience in biblical terms if I wanted to ever tell my family and church friends about it. I felt very alone. I posted the coffee shop experience on the Alien subreddit, but didn't get any responses. About a week later, I decided that I was going to sit out on my balcony at nighttime and stare at the stars. I hadn't done this in weeks, but I felt that it was an important step for me. I said out loud to the sky, aliens, God, or whomever was listening, I wish to understand. I admittedly was staring into the night sky in hopes of seeing a UFO, but what I initially saw was just planes or stars. 5 minutes into my time on the balcony, I saw out of the corner of my eye something moving lazily downward. I looked and saw 5 semi-transparent orbs in a line. They might have been 25 feet above, but they were descending down and eventually over my roof and out of sight. They would have been relatively small, like the size of a drone. They weren't physically connected, but they seemed to move in harmony with one another, and perhaps moving closer to each other to merge. The translucence was surreal. It felt in my mind that this had been invisible initially, and then became visible to me. When the orbs went past my roof, and I surmised that they had landed on the ground, I couldn't see from my vantage point, the terror returned to me. Were they coming for me? I tried to name the fear and spoke aloud that I was sorry for being afraid, and that I was working on overcoming it. I went back inside and reached out to friends. I told them that I thought I might be losing my mind, that I was scared of an abduction happening to me while I was alone. In the days that followed, I found myself integrating the experience. For a 2-week stretch, I felt deep, deep joy. A sense of being wrapped in love. Feeling that I had asked the universe for an answer, and the universe had listened to me. My family did not receive my reports well. One sibling said that although she believed in aliens too, she was concerned that I was experiencing symptoms of schizophrenia. My other sister reiterated as well that she also believes in aliens, but the fact that I'm claiming some sort of personal experience with them seems like a slippery slope. For some people, I described this using angel terminology, and that seemed to work. And while I'm open to viewing this as an angel, I don't like obscuring the full description of my experience to my family. And it grieved me that they viewed my sudden happiness as mania. I've struggled with depression for many years, and it was wonderful to feel consistently happy for that week or two. So, that, my friends, was a UFO and alien encounters story collection. I know the thumbnail says UFO encounters, and I know that one of these stories technically did not include a full UFO encounter, though the orange orbs could be considered UFOs, unidentified flying objects. I know. But putting UFO and alien encounter stories on a thumbnail, it takes up too much space, and it just wouldn't look good. So, UFO encounter stories and alien encounter stories. 2 of them included unidentified flying objects in close proximity, sort of-ish. 2 of them included alien creatures or things in close proximity-ish, so there you go. Hopefully y'all don't, I don't know, hate me for that. I don't try to clickbait my stuff, I swear. I just try to make things that look like aesthetically pleasing for the thumbnail. And I don't want to overdo the words, because too many words on a thumbnail looks ugly. Like my strange and scary stories thumbnails kind of look ugly to me sometimes, but I don't know. Is what it is. I'm a design freak, design-obsessed person, so, yeah. Hope y'all enjoyed the stories. If you did, please do hit that thumbs up button. If you're new to the channel and liked what you heard, consider subscribing, as it does help tremendously. And yeah, we're in the last few days of the month. Oh, sorry. Also, leave me a comment down below if you want to. it's appreciated but never expected. But if you want to just say hi or what's up, please do. Yeah. We're in the last week of the month. We are wearing down on the extra content. April will be, once again, probably a 3 per week month. Hopefully that doesn't destroy my numbers too badly. But it's been fun. It's been fun to do this extra content all month. It's been tiring and a bit stressful, but it's been fun. And I hope you all have been enjoying it. I really do. Because I've liked doing it, so. Yeah. All that said, friends, I hope you're having a beautiful week so far. I hope I do see you again here very soon. But until then, remember, you are loved, you are valid, you are important, you are the best you that you can be. Don't forget it, and don't let anyone tell you otherwise. And until I see you again, my friends, much love, and of course, sleep well.